Oh, okay. He is a well-known columnist for the Salt Lake Tribune. He will be introduced today by one of his cohorts, Jennifer Napier-Pierce. Look out. Multimedia reporter for the Salt Lake Tribune. Following his remarks and calls, we will have our Community Service Award, which will be given to Utah House of Representatives Rebecca Chavez Hope. And she will be introduced by Patrice Airy, one of her old friends. And following that, we will have Robert Miller, who is chair of the Salt Lake Committee on Foreign Relations, will introduce our keynote speaker, Ambassador Christopher Hill, who will address us on hot topics in the world today, a diplomat's view. Robert will also be available after the luncheon to answer any questions you might have regarding the Salt Lake Committee on Foreign Relations. And Ambassador, I have had special instructions on your presentation today, your address. You are to speak for 20 minutes and have 10 minutes of questions because he is very good with questions. So be ready, everybody. And I am to stand next to you so that you only speak for 20 minutes.
My wife put you up to that.
She did. Yeah. Okay, we will go forward with that right now. And Jennifer, you're on.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody, for coming here. It is such a great pleasure for me to introduce my friend, colleague, and the winner of this year's Making Democracy Work Award, Salt Lake Tribune columnist Paul Raleigh. Now, there are three things that you need to know about Paul. So the first one is he is a family man. He loves his wife, former Tribune reporter John House, with all his heart. He loves his kids, he loves his stepkids, he loves his grandkids. I mean, he's always telling stories about the family. So he really cherishes those close relationships, and he has a wide network of close friends who he considers family as well. He's also a rabid University of Utah fan. He's one of those tailgating, wear your colors to work, out-of-state traveling kind of fan. Now, I don't know if Paul wears red body paint, but I would not be surprised. And finally, Paul Raleigh relishes being a journalist. He likes to tell this story of the first night that he came to the Tribune newsroom as a student from the University of Utah. And he came in to work the sports desk and to do box scores, and the room was empty because all of the reporters were out covering the games. The only person in the room was this outdoor editor named Don Brooks. Now, he was crusty, curmudgeonly, old-school journalist, and he was known affectionately as the dead fish editor. So Raleigh comes in the room and he stands there, and he's expecting an assignment from Don Brooks, but Brooks does not acknowledge. So Raleigh continues to stand there, and Brooks continues to ignore. And so minutes are going by, and Raleigh is still standing there, enthusiasm, idealism of this young cub reporter. Finally, Brooks looks him straight in the eye and says, "Are you going to stand there like an effing idiot all night long, or are you going to get to work?" And Raleigh likes to say that it was at that moment he knew he was home. For the past 45 years, Paul Raleigh has worked at the Tribune with only a short stint sandwiched in there at the Associated Press, and his enthusiasm for this work has never waned. He's been a copy boy, a reporter, an editor, a columnist. He wrote for 13 years with his co-columnist, Joanne Jacobson-Wells, who many of you will remember. If you've read his column, you know that his writing runs the gamut, from calling Utah legislators on the carpet to exposing who is running their sprinklers during a rainstorm. And he also celebrates unlikely friendships like the one he has with perennial candidate Merrill Cook. If someone reports some kind of intrigue at the state capitol, Raleigh is able to conjure up some parallel experience from a state partisan party convention from decades ago. He remembers names, he remembers dates. He probably knows all of you in the room. He has such a remarkable memory, and he's a natural storyteller. And he probably has more sources, I would venture to guess, than most other reporters in this state. Now, a few years ago, Raleigh came down with a nasty case of pneumonia. But I kept seeing his byline in the paper. So finally, I asked an editor, what's the deal? And here's what happened. Paul Raleigh has never missed a deadline in his 20 years as a columnist. And the editor said he's not about to start now, so he's filing from his hospital bed. So I don't know if that's dedication or psychosis, but whatever it is, this compulsion to expose corruption, to hold those in power accountable, to highlight unsung heroes, to tell the stories of this community is truly a gift that helps democracy work. And I can't think of anyone more deserving for this award than Paul Raleigh. Paul, congratulations.
This is a made in Utah bowl from Cedar City. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I'm humbled, frankly, to be given an award by this great organization. I've always been a big fan of the League of Women Voters. You've done so much to keep the public informed of what's going on in government, what's going on with politicians. The League of Women Voters and the press, I believe, share a lot of common goals where our objectives are very much the same, and that is the idea that, keeping the idea that democracy best works when we have a very informed public. And the press, I believe, we do the best job we can. The League of Women Voters plays a great role in that. So I'm very humbled to have this award from this organization. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues at the Salt Lake Tribune, my editor Terry Orm, my very favorite journalist Dawn House, who also is my wife. I'm very proud of the Salt Lake Tribune, and I really believe that this award belongs to the Tribune, because I could not do what I have been able to do for all these years if I didn't have complete support and backing from my editors. And I know for a fact that I have caused Terry, the editor and publisher of the Tribune, a great deal of grief from time to time, having to take telephone calls from people complaining about me. But Terry's always had my back. He's always supported me. He's always trusted me, and I've never gotten him sued. Well, actually, except for that one time. But that was a frivolous lawsuit from a prison inmate, so we didn't have anything else to do. So that doesn't count. I won't get into the time that I offended a major advertiser that caused a little bit of grief, but once again, I had complete backing from my editor. And you well know that the Tribune has been facing some serious challenges of late, and we've had to reduce the size of the paper to reduce the cost of newsprint quite a bit. But we have a great staff, and I couldn't be more proud of the people I work with at the Salt Lake Tribune. They put out a great product despite all of the challenges. My colleague Peggy Stack is here year after year after year. The Tribune is regarded as having the best religion coverage in the country, of any newspaper in the country, and that's due to Peggy Stack. And my friend Pat Bagley, the genius of the Salt Lake Tribune. I don't know if you know this, but he's a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize this year. I can't say enough about my staff. I was told to keep it short, so I will. I just want to say thank you very much. I'm proud to be a journalist, and I'm very proud to work for the Salt Lake Tribune.
Okay, I think we forgot your award up here. I'll put it over here. Hello, I'm Patrice Arendt, and I'm honored to tell you about the Community Service Award honoree, my dear friend, Representative Rebecca Chavez Howe. For years, she's been a policy advisor, community activist, and a leader. Inspired by her family and the community she grew up in, she sought out every opportunity, both professionally and personally, to make each community she's lived in a much, much better place. I'm honored to serve with her in the legislature. She began her time in the legislature in 2008 and now serves as our House Democratic Whip. She is focused on so many really important issues: access to health care, homelessness, air quality, end-of-life options, social services issues. This year she passed landmark legislation, the Computer Abuse and Recovery Act. And she's also well known for her leadership in social justice issues. She has worked with the League of Women Voters for years on voting rights legislation. You know, I've often heard that the biggest barrier to voting is whether a person is actually registered to vote. Many people don't understand deadlines or laws relating to voter registration. Rebecca fought for years to provide a pilot project for same-day voter registration, and it finally passed in 2014. And it gives newly motivated voters a voice in their democracy. She continues to fight to protect those who don't have the rights that all people have, so they can have an opportunity to vote. She's also working to make the redistricting process much more fair. Rebecca is a strong voice for those people who are not always able to attend events like these, particularly those who don't have access to adequate housing, employment, and health care. She's our Democratic go-to person on Medicaid expansion, having sponsored the original bill, and she's worked tirelessly to try and pass good legislation in that area, like Healthy Utah. Her position on the Health Reform Task Force, mixed with her community experience, has given her a zeal to pursue options not always available for those in need. She works so hard to advance the interests of her constituents and all Utahns. And she seems to get along with everyone. I have even heard Gail Ruzicka say nice things about her. Although it is true, there are a few right-wing organizations who don't seem to appreciate her voting record. I don't understand why. In addition to her work in the legislature, she teaches as an adjunct faculty member at the University of Utah and has had a distinguished career in public relations and nonprofit associations. This is not the first organization to recognize her. She has received so many awards, I'm not going to try and list them all, but I just wanted to highlight a few of them. She received the Cesar Chavez Peace and Justice Award, the YWCA Outstanding Achievement Award, the Pete Suazo Political Action Award, and the Pioneer in HIV Award for her outreach in connecting and protecting the growing Utah Latino population. She continues to do so much for our community. She's either serving on or served on so many boards in various leadership capacities, including Envision Utah, the ACLU, United Way, Planned Parenthood, the Utah Women's Forum, Plan B Theater, Intermountain Healthcare, Heal Utah, and so many more. In fact, she served on a number of committees supporting her church, the Episcopal Diocese of Utah. She co-chairs the Women in the Economy Commission. It's a group dedicated to breaking down barriers for women in private and public life. Yesterday, that reported in the Tribune today, when she was discussing the sad fact that Utah has the second largest wage gap between men and women in the nation, she noted, "There's a lot of talk about Utah's wonderful economy and how great we're all doing, but we're leaving people behind when you have half the population that disproportionately is not receiving comparable pay." She is a role model for so many people. I think she's always felt strongly about helping to convey to those from diverse backgrounds that they can have a voice in our political process, particularly young people. I also want to acknowledge her husband Martin, who's here, who's very patient, supportive, and just fabulous. I want to thank him for everything he said, and also mention her children, Erica and Michael. Please join me in congratulating Representative Rebecca Fowler's House as the recipient of the Community Service Award.
Thanks, Patrice. Patrice has always been a champion and a mentor of mine, and one of the first people who supported me when I was considering running for office and told me to step forward and lean in, as we have often heard lately. I want to thank the League for this amazing honor, and all of you, many friends that I see at the various tables here today, for being here. In receiving this honor, I am mindful that I am part and parcel of the experiences of my life and the people who influenced me, especially my parents. My father was an immigrant from Michoacan, Mexico. He retained his legal resident status but never became a citizen. He always thought he was going to go back home. So even though he was part of our community, he always knew that there was something different in the fact that he was not able to vote. And so my mother spoke for him. So she was the one that was exercising franchise. They taught me that words are hollow without action, and that it is prudent for those of us with voice and power to work on behalf of the voiceless and the powerless. There were others who guided me, my godparents, aunts and uncles, family friends. We were a village of activists. My mother in particular taught me the importance and responsibility of franchise. I remember being bundled up in snow gear on snowy November days as a young child to join her as she went to our local school to vote on election day. And how I would sit in that old Ford Fairlane and she would talk about the candidates and what they believed in and why she was supporting them. These experiences modeled expectations, and I take those rights and responsibilities very seriously, both as a citizen and as a public official. You'll notice that some of the books that I chose as my favorites were children's books. I started reading when I was 3 years old, and so I was just someone that just loved to read and read and read. And a lot of the books that I chose as a child often had themes of sacrifice, of female characters that were kind of taking the lead and taking charge and making their own destiny. And I see how that made an imprint in my lives. And so children's books and children's literature means a lot to me, and that's why I wanted to identify those books as ones that I would recommend that you share with young readers in your lives. You inspire me. Those of you in the League who delve deeply into issues of concern to our community and coordinate public dialogue so that a diversity of voices can be heard. Your white papers and research on public policy concerns, including my own legislation on physician aid in dying, have been invaluable. And if you have ideas or if you want to talk to me about what the work is going to be this summer, I'll be glad to chat with you offline. But we have work to do there. There are others of you who tirelessly follow the work of the legislature and our local government. I see the League on the Hill as a complement to the Fourth Estate because you question what you see and convene healthy debate on issues related to clean air and water, infrastructure development, participatory democracy, an issue that I hold dear, social justice and equality. You work on so many issues, and that is so helpful for us. You and other stakeholders who commit so much time to work on the things that need to be done in the area of civic engagement. I share this honor with you because things don't change if we don't work together, and I have been privileged to have you there in the trenches with many of us. So again, I want to thank my husband Martin, my children Erica and Michael, who aren't here with me today, but if I didn't have them behind me, there's no way that I could do the work in the community, and I certainly couldn't do it with all of your support. So thanks so much. I do appreciate this honor.
Robert, before I have you come up and introduce the ambassador, I had one important paragraph which I left out of my early remarks to the program, and that is to recognize the ambassador's wife. Julie Hill, would you please stand up? I want you to see this lady. She is an incredible lady in her own right and has as much energy and foresight as her husband. Whether you know or not, you don't know, but from 2008 to 2009, she was the vice president of the League of Women Voters in St. Petersburg, Florida. And she is active also as a member of the League in Denver, Colorado. So we are so pleased to have you with us today. She is on the Governor's Council of, is it Physical Fitness?
Healthy and active living, physical fitness.
Yes, right, all of that. And she has been involved in many philanthropic organizations, so thank you for coming and sharing this time with us. Okay, Bob?
I want you to know that I'm doing my part to equalize the division of wages between men and women in the state of Utah. I work for my wife, Bonnie Miller. She doesn't pay me. So that's what I can do. Salt Lake Committee on Foreign Relations is delighted to sponsor in part this luncheon and bring Ambassador Chris Hill to the state of Utah. For those of you who may have an interest in the Salt Lake Committee, we have about 8 dinner meetings a year at the Alba Club. We feature speakers, none quite as luminous as Ambassador Hill, but pretty close. And we have a very interesting time. Linda Sage, who is your officer as well, has information about the committee. So today is my pleasure to introduce your featured speaker, Ambassador Christopher Robert Hill. Ambassador Hill has received numerous awards during his diplomatic career, including the State Department's Distinguished Service Award for his contributions as a member of the U.S. negotiating team in the Bosnian peace settlement, and the Robert S. Fraser Award for Peace Negotiations for his work during the Kosovo crisis. Along with German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Aga Khan, he was named a finalist for Britain's prestigious Chatham House Prize, awarded for significantly contributing to improved international relations. He is a recipient of the Naval War College's Distinguished Graduate Leadership Award. He was named by both Republican and Democratic presidents to serve as United States Ambassador, first to Macedonia, then to Poland, South Korea, and recently Iraq. He has worked in 6 administrations and served under 11 United States Secretary of States. He is presently Dean of the Joseph Korbel School of International Studies at the University of Denver. Chris Hill's career path took a logical, perhaps even predictable course. His father was a diplomat in the Foreign Service. As a child, he traveled with his family to many countries. After graduating from Bowdoin College in 1974, he joined the Peace Corps and was sent to volunteer as a credit union advisor in Cameroon. After a time, the young advisor became concerned with self-serving actions by the board of directors of one of his charges, the Tully Estates Credit Union, Tully T Estates Credit Union. At the time, as the time for board elections drew near, he assembled his own slate of candidates from those he believed would be more honest, more educated. The election was held. He lost. His constituents overwhelmingly voted in the ongoing board of directors, and he learned a lesson. Understanding the politics, excuse me, and the culture of the community you're working in is critical if you hope to influence events. It is a lesson that he's applied over and over again throughout a long and successful diplomatic career. He was mentored by several of our iconic diplomats who recognized his intelligence, dedication, and even temperament, which several of them lacked, by the way, and harnessed him to their mission. First was the gruff and tough Lawrence Larry Eagleburger, who I'm sure many of us have heard of, who was the U.S. ambassador to Belgrade when Hill arrived in 1978 at the age of 25. Later, it was the brilliant but volatile Richard Holbrooke, who along with Hill and his team brought the Serbs, Croats, and Bosnians together at the negotiating table right at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to forge the successful Dayton Peace Accords. This has not been a quiet life. As NATO attacked the Serbs in March of 1999, Hill, then the newly appointed U.S. ambassador to Skopje, Macedonia, herded his embassy staff into the basement safe room as an angry crowd attacked the embassy using the U.S. flagpole to attempt to batter down the embassy door. Earlier in Kosovo, bullets had pinged off the rear bumper of his armored SUV as he was searching for Kosovo Liberation Army leaders, trying to find somebody, anybody, to negotiate with. He has negotiated or served for a veritable who's who of international political and diplomatic world leaders, from Slobodan Milosevic to Madeleine Albright, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, not to speak of the current and 3 former U.S. presidents, and Mother Teresa thrown in for good measure. We are honored that he has accepted our invitation to speak to the League and to our Foreign Relations Committee. Please give an enthusiastic welcome to Ambassador Christopher Hill.
Thank you very much, Bob, and I really appreciated that you read my book. I mean, the trouble is no one will now buy it because I've heard it all, but anyway, thank you so much. Those are such very kind remarks. Let me just say it's a great pleasure to be here at this 24th annual State of the Community Luncheon. As you know, the League of Women Voters is very dear to my heart. I like the League so much I married a member of the League. But also my aunt was a president of her chapter in Boston and Eastern Massachusetts. My mother was also a member of the League of Women Voters. It really is important. And I'm going to stay out of politics. I've always done that throughout my career. I never interfere in the internal affairs of another country, and I might as well include our own. But I think we need the League of Women Voters this time around. I think we absolutely need the League of Women Voters. I think we really have to sort of work on our democracy and work on it very hard these days. I also want to congratulate Rebecca Chavez-Hauk for her Community Service Award, and Paul Raleigh for his Making Democracy work. And What to me is very inspiring about both those people is, sitting here and listening to their acceptance speeches is the degree to which they're so grateful to others, because I think all of these jobs that we have are really, how to put it, team sports. We're only as good as the people around us. We can only do as much as the people around us want us to do. I was particularly moved by Paul talking about his editors. Do you know how rare that is for a writer to talk about an editor? So anyway, it was a great pleasure to see, just to be here and to see the whole atmosphere, because as I suggested, we're going through some tough times, but I don't think anyone should ever doubt our leadership in the world and the fact that we're a country that just, whether we like it or not, we count. We absolutely count. Anyone who's been overseas, you realize that everyone is interested in what we have to say. Whether we're right or wrong, they're interested in what we have to say. So I think we need to be, we need to understand that, we're still great and will be great. And so I don't think we need to, talk about somehow worrying about other countries taking our leadership. People always talk about that somehow this is China's century. Well, if you look at the inbox of problems that the Chinese president has, I can assure you our president would not want to exchange those inboxes. So we have a lot of challenges ahead. But before I get to that and talk about some of these trouble spots, I just want to, I'd just like to quote a former Polish Party First Secretary. If you read my bio, I spent a lot of time in Poland, but before my time in Poland, in the late 50s, early 60s, there was a Polish Party First Secretary named Władysław Gomułka, a name otherwise lost to history. And Władysław Gomułka was known for very long speeches and not entirely successful metaphors. And one day he stood up in front of a large crowd and he said, in Krakow in southern Poland, and he said, "Comrades, just a few years ago, our nation stood on the very edge of a deep abyss. And I'm here to tell you today, comrades, that we have taken an important step forward." I think as we contemplate some of these issues out there in the world, I think we need to avoid that important step forward and perhaps at times take a step back, reflect on the issues, and see how we can make them better and certainly leave them better than when we found them. On January 20th, which is not very far away, just really a few months, we'll have a new president who will walk into the Oval Office after a rather exhausting day of parades with inaugural balls to follow. And we'll look at an inbox which will be pretty high with problems. And so that president will look at some of these issues, some of these folders, and will have to decide, which are the ones that he or she is going to have to attend to. I think part of the problem of being a president is you can't just look at one issue and say, I'm going to focus on this one. You're going to have to juggle a lot of things at the same time. So I think one of the most important issues our new president is going to have to look at is the problem of sort of these countries that want to build nuclear weapons. That's kind of an old-fashioned thought, but I think nuclear weapons remain, I think, a great threat. And when put together with the issue of international terrorism and the fact that some of the countries that are interested in nuclear weapons would think nothing of selling them to a terrorist, I think we need to pay a lot of attention. And so I think our new president is going to have to look very hard at the North Korean issue. North Korea has been around as a problem for some time. I spent a lot of time dealing with North Korea for about 4 years. I spent a lot of time across the table. I mean, these are, how to put it, people only a mother can love. I mean, you just are emotionally exhausted even if you agree with something they say, and that's pretty good. So I think we have to really be prepared to take on this problem head on. When I began this task in 2004, 2005, I had been ambassador to South Korea. And for me, one of the shocking things about being ambassador to South Korea was to see that the way the administration at the time was handling North Korea, with very bellicose statements made from many thousands of miles away, the way we were handling North Korea was essentially creating a lot of doubts and a lot of concerns about us among people who are our allies, the South Koreans. It was as if the South Koreans were saying, you know, that's easy for you to say when you're sitting in Washington and talking about what terrible people our neighbors are. That's very easy for you to say, but you are thousands of miles away, and we're right here with North Korea just about 36 miles away. And so we had put ourselves in the position by 2005 of creating, we had created a situation where some 45, upwards of 50%, depending on which poll you read, of South Koreans were blaming the United States for the North Korean nuclear ambitions. So when you have made North Korea a victim of U.S. intransigence, you know you're doing something wrong. So I think we fixed that, but one thing we have not fixed is the fact that North Korea is still very much engaged in its nuclear program. During the course of the second term for President George W. Bush, we did manage to get them to stop producing plutonium. We got international inspectors in there. We got North Korea in a better place, but we didn't solve the problem. And so in the meantime, you know, as this new regime in North Korea under Kim Jong-un, when I was dealing with it, I was dealing with Kim Jong-il, and I could not imagine that there could be anyone worse than Kim Jong-il, and I just hadn't thought of his son. And so Kim Jong-un has made it very clear he has no interest in negotiation, no interest in backing off of these nuclear ambitions. You know, we had a situation in the summer of 2008 where it looked like Kim Jong-il was moving in the right direction. We had things shut down. We had a beginning of a process to know what their ambitions precisely were and what we needed to do with them. But then they stopped in the fall of 2008. It was partly because Kim Jong-il had actually become Kim Jong-very ill. He had had a stroke, so there wasn't a lot of clear direction within the North Korean regime. But what we understood at the time was, since they were not giving us proper access to the sites, to additional sites that we had suspicions about, we could not sort of go ahead and establish relations or do things like that. So in the meantime, our suspicions were correct. We have South Korea with us. And what is very important today is that we have China with us. Increasingly, we, the Chinese and the U.S., think alike about this issue. And so as we look ahead to the next few years, I think we need to work with the Chinese, work much harder with the Chinese, establish sort of patterns of cooperation with China, and see if we can create a situation where the U.S., South Korea, Japan, China, and even Russia can bring the pressure needed to get North Korea to stop doing this. China has already signed on to some sanctions. In the last month, they've signed on to some UN sanctions. You may have read just yesterday that they've halted purchases of North Korean coal and certain precious metals from North Korea. China is beginning to behave in the way we need them to behave on North Korea. But when you look at some of China's behavior elsewhere, it's not acceptable. Look at how they're behaving in the South China Sea, where they're trying to turn the South China Sea into a southern Chinese lake at the expense of all of their Southeast Asian partners. This also needs some addressing on our part. We, China has not only created facts on the ground, they've actually been creating the ground itself by pouring dirt onto some of these atolls and claiming them as islands. This is misbehavior, and we need to deal with China on this. And I would put that up there as a high echelon issue that we need to deal with China. But I think as a general proposition, we need to look very carefully at this relationship with China. This country that's some 1.3 billion people that is not going away. And we need to figure out what our priorities are with China and how we're going to deal with China. It is a relationship really too big to fail. We have no choice but to proceed with China. And we need to be a little careful when we go to the Chinese and list all the things that we're worried about from China. We obviously have great concerns about the fact that over the years they've essentially helped North Korea and helped North Korea in many bad ways. That is an issue we need to take on. We also need to be very clear with the Chinese that no, they can't turn the South China Sea into a Chinese lake. But again, we need to be careful with all the questions and understand that just as we do in our private lives, what is our priority? What are the issues that we need to deal with in China? Is Tibet the top issue, as Hollywood sometimes thinks it is in China? I think Tibet is a terrible situation, but is that at the top of the agenda? So we have to be very careful about kind of coming up with with sort of a better sense of what the priorities are in dealing with China. Again, I think we need to start with that North Korean nuclear ambition. Now, a lot of people say China is not interested in doing anything about North Korea because China feels that somehow in the long run, if North Korea goes down, there will be North Korean refugees going into China, and that this will create a refugee problem for China. They're not prepared to deal with that. I would argue to you that's the least of it. I think what the real problems that China has is if North Korea goes down, that will be broadly perceived in China as a victory for the U.S. and a defeat for China. And so we need to, I think, have a much more engaged, a much deeper relationship with China such that we can put some of that distrust to rest. We need to make clear to China that if North Korea went down and if the Korean people were once again reunited, which would be their right to be reunited, that we would not take strategic advantage of it from the Chinese. We would not put listening posts up on the Yalu River. We would not put U.S. troops on the Yalu River. We need to make clear to the Chinese what we would do and what we wouldn't do. And I think there's a lot of mistrust. And I think this mistrust has given rise within China to this kind of zero-sum thinking that they have. For many Chinese, the idea of win-win solutions is sort of win-win is a Burmese dissident or something. They need to understand that we can both, I think, work together on some of these key questions. So if I'm the new president, I would look at, first of all, dealing with China. I mean, everyone talks that way these days. So. I tell you, looking at some of these presidents, they look like the Hunger Games at times. So I think we need to have a serious effort with China. And recalling my time in Iraq, I was there. I was the first ambassador. I was the first ambassador under President Obama. And one thing President Obama said was, Iraq is so important. He asked his vice president, Joe Biden, to take special attention to Iraq. After all, when I got there, we had 144,000 troops there. And the president felt that the vice president needed to be engaged there. Indeed, the vice president was there about every 6 weeks. I think the next president needs to ask her vice president or his vice president to spend that kind of time, that type of quality and quantity time with the Chinese. So I'd like to see that this pivot that President Obama talked about, which has unfortunately come to be understood as a pivot where we shifted interest away from the Middle East. So the Middle East and the people in the Middle East felt we were kind of abandoning them. We shifted interest away from Europe. So many Europeans felt we were abandoning them. And then when we spent more time on East Asia, it looked as if we were looking to somehow encircle China. And I think what we need is a real pivot where we would have someone in a very senior position, and I think the vice president's the right person to be that special envoy, to be in China regularly and to deal with this relationship. Because if we can get the relationship with China right, and if China can do the things it has to do, because it has a lot of internal problems right now that we cannot imagine, despite our elections, we cannot imagine some of the internal problems that China has. So I think we could do a lot better with China. I think as the president looks through these folders on the inbox, the next issue would be this question of international terrorism and how is this happening within the Middle East. I think when you look at Syria, when you look at Iraq, when you look at all these problems in the Middle East, you can see that we need a broader policy to the Middle East. We cannot just be looking at one place. We need to consider more broadly what is going on in the Middle East. Now, there's something called Sunni and Shia. And Sunni and Shia have been with this schism, if you will, in the Arab world and the Islamic world has been around for 1,300 years. So I think we have to be a little careful with some leaders who've come back from whether service as four-star generals or whatever, who came back and said, solved all the problems in Iraq, no more 1,300-year schism. Be very careful about people who claim they've solved a 1,300-year problem in 8 months of work on the sea. There's a big problem there. There's an especially big problem because some of the regional players who should be urging that the place calm down are themselves part of the problem. Saudi Arabia is a key ally of the United States, very important country in the Arab Peninsula. But what the Saudis have often been engaged in is trying to tell their own radicals to get out of Saudi Arabia and cause problems elsewhere, and just don't cause problems here. That's not leadership, and in fact, that's making the problem worse. Similarly, we have Iran, which I think it was a very positive nuclear agreement with Iran, yet Iran continues to engage in Arab areas in a way that has really made many Arabs very suspicious of their motives. When you look at Iran's activities in southern Lebanon with Hezbollah, which is Iran is a Shia country, Hezbollah is a Shia organization. When you look at how Iran has funneled money to some of these Shia groups, this is real mischief, and we need to have a broader and deeper discussion with the Iranians about this because they've done the right thing to date on nuclear policy. They've got a long way to go, though, in terms of being a responsible regional power. So we need to work this through with them. Now, these issues are not easy, and while I'm not suggesting that everyone spend all their time studying Middle East history, it is important now and again to kind of consult a history book and understand that history didn't begin last Tuesday. It usually has had some other antecedents to it. And when you look at Iran's involvement in southern Lebanon and in a place like, with groups like Hezbollah, you really have to go back to about, let's say, 1500. Where you will see that Iran was also a Sunni country, converted to a Shia country as the Ottoman Turks were putting pressure on Iran, putting pressure on the Persian identity. And so they brought in clerics from southern Lebanon who were Shia clerics to help proselytize and turn Iran into a Shia country. I don't think this is so important to secular and the engineering classes of Tehran, but it is important to these Ayatollah classes, and we need to understand that whole dynamic a lot better. And we need to see what can be done to calm down the situation of regional leadership between the Saudis and the Iranians. Similarly, we have a country called Turkey. Turkey has been an ally of ours. It was brought into NATO even though it didn't meet all of the standards of what kind of democracy they had, et cetera. But it is a democracy, and yet it has also been misbehaving in the Middle East. And so we haven't been able to rely on the Turks, and that's a relationship that I think the new president really needs to drill down on and focus on. And finally, the fourth regional power in the Middle East is a country that we know well called Egypt. And Egypt, over the years, there'd be some trouble in the Middle East. Egyptian diplomats would go, they'd calm it down, they'd say to the Saudis, could you pay the bill for this? And that would be, they'd basically calm it down. But Egypt is not able to play that diplomatic role. So we have a situation where the four regional powers in the Middle East are essentially not doing their job in terms of dealing with these problems. And so we're seeing a part of the world really undergoing a kind of nightmare. And that nightmare could be dangerous to us. We've already seen the effects of it in places like Western Europe, and it could get worse if we don't calm down some of the violence. With respect to Syria, I would say that two of our major problems in the Middle East, one was saying that Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons. Turned out not to be the case, and I think we've paid a huge price for that miscalculation. A second miscalculation, which happened a few years later, 2011, was that Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian leader, would be gone in a matter of weeks. So we just needed to announce we'll never deal with that guy again. He'd be gone in a matter of weeks, and we'd look like geniuses. Well, he's still there, and I think we need to understand that Syria is about as complicated a patchwork of different identities and loyalties as you will ever find in the Middle East. It's too early, really, at this point to say what did the Arab Spring mean in history. You remember the famous line when President Nixon asked Zhou Enlai, what did the French Revolution, what's the significance of the French Revolution? And Zhou Enlai said, too early to tell. Well, certainly that can be said about this Arab Spring. But one thing is already clear, is that with the Arab Spring was a major effort to sort of throw the rascals out, to say that these governments were all corrupt, we want them out, which is fine, except to say that when you reduce the confidence, when you reduce the power, when you really take away the authority of nation states, people fill the void with other things, and they don't necessarily fill it with democracy. They often fill it with other things such as tribalism and sectarianism, and that's what we've got in the Middle East. There are no strong nation states there, and certainly Syria has been very weakened as a state, but the solution for it is not a war. The solution for it is political arrangements by which at some point people in Syria will understand what the future is. Now, there's been a lot of discussion in Washington, should we be arming the Free Syrian Army, should we be leveling the killing field, essentially. I would argue to you that Syria doesn't need more guns. What Syria needs is American leadership, together with some other interested countries, to say what should Syria look like in the future. People always wonder, how did the Bosnian War end? And the Bosnian War ended by something called a contact group plan that was implemented in Dayton, Ohio. And what that was to say Bosnia shall be one state. It'll consist of two entities, a Serb entity, a Muslim Croat entity. It shall have a three-person presidency with rotating terms. It'll have a parliament in Sarajevo, but also it will have local assemblies in the Serb area of Banja Luka, but also in the federation areas between the Muslims and the Croats. I mention all that because essentially what happened in Bosnia was that people began to understand what the future of Bosnia was going to look like. They even had a pretty good idea of what the territorial arrangements. So there was a point at which you say, well, do I really want to be the last person to die in the civil war, or do I want to stop this and join in this process? I submit to you that the lack of U.S. leadership in Syria has not been our failure to provide sufficient weapons to the various sides in the Syrian conflict. Our lack of leadership is in putting forward a diplomatic plan that would create a situation where people start gathering around it. Those would be supporters of peace, and people who reject it, those would be rejectionists. Now, some people say, well, it's a little patronizing to the Syrians. It is patronizing to the Syrians, but when you have engaged in a civil war in which some 300,000 people have been killed, you kind of lose the right to feel patronized too. And I think we need to get something like this on the table and begin working this with other like-minded countries. I don't know whether this will work in Syria, whether you can keep it within its international borders, but I think we ought to try, because show me a border change and I'll show you another war. So I think trying to come up with a plan for Syria, get various parties to agree to it, and see if some kind of power sharing can be arranged. Syria has a Sunni majority, but you know, the Alawite minority that President Assad has survived with, they're only 15%. So how have the Alawites done so well to hold on to power all these years with only 15%? The answer is every other minority in Syria has been supporting. I'll be with you in a second.
I was told by Julie to stand next to you, not behind you.
Okay, I got it. So I think we're going to need much more of a broad focus on the Middle East, but we need to deal with this situation in Syria if we don't, because if we don't do that, we will have continued migratory flows, which we're already seeing today, and we will have a Middle East that continues to be lined up in terms of pro-Shia and pro-Sunni. Finally, let me say, so I would put that up there on the top of the inbox. And finally, I think our president really needs to spend a little more time on Europe and a little more time about the concerns that many Europeans have about Russia. Unlike China, which is a power in ascendancy, and a power that therefore has some patience about its ascendancy, I think Russia is in decline. And when countries are in decline, they can be more dangerous than the ones that are in the ascent. And so I think we need to look very carefully about what kind of risks is Putin willing to take, and we need to be prepared to deal with those. For countries in Eastern Europe, such as Poland, and they are very pleased to be in NATO. They want more sign than NATO's in them. And so I think that will be the challenge, to make sure that these countries feel that their NATO membership is meaningful and protects them from encroachment from, I think, a very dangerous, but I think a declining Russian state. So I think as the president looks at all this, the president may not want to go to those inaugural balls that night, but I think it is for us, really, I think, to provide the leadership. Whether we like it or not, we're kind of it. I don't think the Chinese will be able to manage these Eastern European concerns. I don't think the Chinese will be able to referee Sunni and Shia issues. So I don't think it's China that we can look to. I think we have to look to ourselves, with a proviso that we need to be careful not to take that important step forward. So thank you very much.
Sorry, we have to end this. I think we could go on all afternoon just staying right here. Could we not? We will now have, he took up 5 minutes of his question time, so now we only have 5 minutes of questions. If any of you here have a question you would like to ask, I will see what we can do for you. Yes. Stand up and say who you are and then ask your question.
It's hard for me to shout.
Do we have a microphone?
No, we don't. I'll repeat the question. Go ahead.
Forgive me, but I'd like to tell a little story about here.
Oh, come on up here then. Uh-oh.
Excuse me. I'd like to tell a little story about the ambassador. We have a Utah serving in Oman, who's a very dear friend of ours and has served in the Middle East his entire life. And I asked the ambassador, I bought his book, I will read it, but I asked the ambassador if he would sign it to Mark and Huda Sievers. And because we've known them so long, we've had a little glimpse into that world. These people are the best of the best. We can be so proud of their expertise and character and knowledge, and also the dangers they put themselves in and the sacrifices they make. And in the foreword to the book, in the autographed part of the book, he said, Godspeed in all you do. Keep your head down. I would just like to thank you and your family for all your sacrifices and what you've done. Thank you.
I don't know how much time I have, but I have two quick questions. One is the Iran deal.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has said that is the first order of business to renegotiate that nuclear pact. Wonder if you could comment on that. Secondly, more broadly, what does diplomacy look like under a President Trump? Okay, did you all hear that?
So the first question on the Iran deal that President Trump, I think some of the other candidates have said they'll tear up on the first day in office. First of all, you know, this is often misunderstood to be a U.S.-Iran deal. It's not a U.S.-Iran deal. It was a deal with Iran, the U.S., Britain, France, Germany, China, and Russia. The sanctions relief has essentially already been given to the Iranians, so it would make absolutely no sense to tear it up because you would have to start from scratch in order to put the sanctions back on. So it would not be in our interest. And I'm trying to get my mind around the first day of the Trump administration, but let me just tell you, I don't think there's any person who could come into office and want to tear that up and feel that that was a good day for U.S. interests. And let me just say more broadly about, you know, I have really avoided trying to be involved with, you know, saying one candidate's good and the other's bad, but some of the things Donald Trump has said are extremely dangerous for our interests in the world. And you don't treat allies the way he talks about it. You don't talk about the South Koreans or the Japanese, let alone the Mexicans, the way he discusses that. We cannot bully our way through as world leaders. We need to work with other countries. And I think, you know, showing mutual respect. You know, there's some countries you really need to back off from and be very, very tough with them, no question. But he seems to want to be very tough with all our allies and essentially stripping us of any support in the world. And you know, I said on CNN the other night, I said, I don't know what he's talking about, and neither does he. And so, that's kind of where we are. This gentleman over here.
I seem to be the one that always walks into Rome with a cold bucket of water. And I see a pattern of Sunni Shiites and North and South Korea and China and America and Putin in America, where this has been, and you talk about history, this has been the course of history. There's one force fighting with another force for dominance of any situation or any political situation. We see it in the U.S. Congress.
Yeah.
We see it, Mr. Bailey is up for Pulitzer Prize for utilizing that situation in the state of Utah to point out our differences and how difficult it is for us to get together to negotiate at the state level and at the county level. And here you're talking about world politics. Is there something on the horizon that makes me think, or I should allow me to think, that we can actually solve these problems? Because I don't see it coming our way.
Well, if you look at
the structure of Turner and how we negotiate.
I think if you look at Western Europe, for example, 70 years ago, kind of a blink of an eye historically, you had a situation where France and the UK were in this mortal combat with the Germans. It had happened 20 years before that. It had happened 30 years before that. And yet today, I think Europe is whole and at peace. I think it's a tremendous accomplishment, and I think it speaks to the diplomacy and the building of structures in Europe that has made war among those countries pretty much obsolete, certainly as far as we can see. You mentioned North and South Korea fighting for dominance. I wouldn't analyze it that way. North and South Korea were people that were together. When the Soviets entered the war against Japan, they went as far down as the 38th parallel. The United States said, stop, we will take the surrender of Japanese troops south of the 38th parallel. You will take the surrender of Japanese troops north of the 38th parallel. And we ended up with a divided Korea. This is not akin to a divided Germany or something. This was a miscarriage of justice to the Korean people who've lived with this brutal division ever since World War II. I don't think North Korea is going to make it for the long run. And so I think the real issue is we need to stand with our ally, the South Koreans, try to be in sync with them as we all contemplate the fact that North Korea will not be with us for the rest of history. And we need to make sure that when North Korea finally does go under, we don't have a situation where China tries to grab the northern part of the Korean Peninsula. These are issues that require relationship building and I think a lot of really tough diplomacy. But your point's well taken. We live in a world where the challenges continue and frankly the brutality of this world continues. But I think at the same time there's a lot we can do and should be doing rather than just be issuing sort of blood-curdling statements about the rest of the world.
Thank you. We would like to thank, yes, I see you guys been wanting to ask a question. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask two questions. First of all, would you, without sound like an endorsement, is there any candidate that understands any of these things you talked about that you feel like would be our best chance? And second of all, and I mean this in all seriousness, would you ever run for president?
That's what I was thinking. He could do the job.
His wife said yes.
You know, one of the great things about the League of Women Voters is not taking stands. And so, no, I don't think it's appropriate for me to endorse a candidate, but yes, there is a candidate who has the experience to deal with these things, and we'll just have to see how the American voters want to deal with that. So, and thank you for your endorsement.
Thank you, Ambassador. And we would just like to give you a little momentum of our graciousness. He is a political characterization of our ambassador who came. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm so glad we had a chance to ask a few questions of the ambassador. And at this point, I would like to thank my luncheon committee who have worked tirelessly and have committed themselves to a number of meetings, and they are very talented and wonderful people. I'd like to thank Judy Short, our luncheon treasurer. Would she stand, please? Don't be swaying, stand up. Let's see. Linda Johnson, Linda Sage, who's been helping here, and Nancy Milling, Nancy, there she is with her flowers, and Nancy Winkler, who could not be with us today, she's become ill, and Nancy Young, where are you? Yes. She was helped us get the ambassador to come, so we really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. And let's see, if I missed anybody, I don't believe so. And our luncheon helpers, Tina Hose and Lee Cotter, we really appreciate you. Lead us with the membership table. Please visit it and get some information on the league. There is some information on studies that we do. We have one there on human trafficking. Another is on, I can't remember. Oh, it's a prison study that we've done on the stuff that is going on with our prison. It's relocation, etc.
That's with dignity.
Death with dignity, yes, we work on that one too. Anyway, we hope that you will visit the registration table and then take seriously if you would like to become a member. We have all kinds of memberships, those who are active and those who just want to get the information. So it's all up to you. And men are very welcome to join too. Thank you very much for coming to our luncheon. And now we will have our hat ladies come forward and we will have a drawing done very quickly. Oh, we never did get our baskets brought in, didn't we?
Yeah, they are, they're right here.
Oh, they're over here, okay.
Do we know what goes with the
Nancy Milling, would you like to come forward and help us with the drawing? Oh, there you are. Do you have the name of our little girl? Who's our Girl Scout? Where is she? Come on up. Okay. Thank you all very much for coming today, and we will have our Girl Scout be our person who draws for the picnic basket. Look at this Girl Scout. Has she been busy forever? Look at her. Wonderful. No wonder she's in this program. Okay, the ticket number is 417565. I don't know. Here we go. Do we have a winner? Right back here? Come on up. Come on up. That's fine.
No, we didn't. Yeah,
The next one is the goodies basket. Here we go for the goodies basket. 417574. 417574. Here we go. That basket. Big one. For the Tanger outlet bag, 417407. 407. Carl? All right. Come on up. And what is it?
Sue, what was the last one?
The Tangers one. She has.
Was it 407?
This one is for Party in a Box. We have ticket 361627. All right, come on up. It's party time. Chocolate and coffee basket. Three, 61629. 361629. This is for the chocolate. Yes. That is the, which one was it? Chocolate basket. Chocolate basket, right there. If you'd like to. Okay. She's got 2 baskets. She's party time. She will help. Okay, this one is for the Sunshine Coffee Square. Anybody here? Three 61622. 361-622. 361-622.
Oh, who's doing it?
This one is for Agatha Ruiz de la Prada, Queen's Sheep Set. 361-616. Three 616. Anybody? Jeez. Okay, anybody want La Prada sheets? Yeah, do it again. We're going for the La Prada sheets again, 417-379. 417-379. Anybody with 417? Oh, all right, come on up. Hot Topics basket. 417-424. 417-424. Oh, here we go. Okay. Oh! Mary. I hope Everett likes hot sauce. Here is for the other coffee square. 417-507. 417-507. Here we go. Elisa Gardentown Strike Runner. 417-519. 417-519.